Tastemakers was funded in part by
In the hands of those who take pride in what they do, something unique can be created. Edward Jones is proud to support the craftspeople who define the maker movement.
and by Fleischmann's Yeast and A.B. Mowry.
We are harvesting seafood faster than Mother Nature is replenishing the supply, and so a lot of you are looking for sustainable seafood choices. Well, farmed oysters, mussels, and clams are an incredibly green choice that is also delicious, and so today we are heading to Penn Cove Shellfish in Coupeville, Washington. I'm Kat Neville, and I've been telling the story of local food for about 20 years. In that time, I've seen the American food movement explode in tiny towns and big cities from coast to coast. In Tastemakers, I explore the maker movement and take you along for the journey to meet the makers who define the flavor of American cuisine. In this episode of Tastemakers, we are here in Coupeville, Washington, about an hour north of Seattle, to check in with the folks from Penn Cove Shellfish. They are farming mussels, oysters, and clams to give people across the country a briny taste of the Northwest.
We started as a company in Coupeville about 1975, and my dad had been in the service, and our family, we lived in Europe and we lived in Asia. And both in Europe and Asia, there's a lot of shellfish farming, and certainly shellfish consumption is kind of off the charts there compared to here. And my dad had it in his mind, I think, that he wanted to be an oyster farmer. And so we came back here, and he was rotating out of the service, and he got talking to the other guys in the industry. And whether it was the fact that a lot of the oyster farmers he spoke with didn't seem to be making a lot of money, or whether he just noticed the lack of any mussel farming going on, he decided to become America's mussel farmer. We started looking for places to farm mussels, and we ended up coming into Coupeville on a low tide, and the pier was covered with mussels, and the beaches and all the mooring lines were covered with mussels, and so it looked like a good place to get started. Shellfish farming is unique. Even though they farm shellfish all over the world, the way that you do it becomes very site-specific, because it's based on your weather exposure, your currents, your wind. All of those things come into play as to how you're going to farm the shellfish. So not having a shellfish industry, especially for mussels, that was native to the area, we had to figure out what worked here.
Unlike clams and oysters, mussel farming does not rely on the tides. The mussels are gathered up on ropes, and essentially they just hang out on rafts until they're ready to be harvested, which is typically in about 12 to 14 months. Now, each one of those rafts contains between 900 and 2,500 lines, and each one of those lines can hold up to 50 pounds of mussels.
Our farm is a series of rafts floating out in the bay here in Penn Cove and in Quilcene Bay. And the rafts are in what the state would consider aquatic lands. So it's not ranch land, it's aquatic land. So we lease the ground underneath those rafts and the water that comes with it. We have a 55-acre lease here in Penn Cove and a 21-acre lease over in Quilcene Bay. The rafts are spaced out to allow boats to get through them. They're spaced far enough so you get good current flow, which is important because shellfish are filter feeders. And so all of that current that's coming in and going out with each tide is bringing all this algae that the mussels are feeding on. here. We're protected from the wind by the bluff. We have this great exposure to the opening of Penn Cove. And on the far east side, over at the base of the Cascades, the Skagit River and the Stillaguamish Rivers are there. This time of year, they're bringing down all this snow melt, which is full of nutrients from the mountains. Come springtime, we start getting the sunshine, and it's essentially like fertilizing your grass. And Penn Cove acts as something of a basin for this sunshine and nutrient, and it creates this big bowl of plankton soup, and so the mussels thrive here. We have three main types of filter feeders here. We've got mussels, oysters, and clams. And so they're what they call bivalves, or two shells. They have an intake and an output siphon, and so they're filtering constantly. An adult mussel might filter 15 gallons of water a day, whereas a large adult oyster might filter 50 gallons of water a day. So they're pulling water in, they're straining out plankton and other debris, and then they'll take in the algae and digest that. As they digest it, they grow nice mussel shells and meats. Tim Jones is our farm operations manager. Tim came out here, I think over 20 years ago now. He runs our crews really well. He understands the farming aspect of what we do, and he's been a great person to oversee our mussel farming operations.
So the boat pulls up, and then the guys, they pull these lines out of the water.
Right.
Kind of tell me how that goes.
Sure, we have an elevator on the front of the boat that will pull the line actually out of the water onto the vessel. But the kind of hard job is getting that line to the side of the vessel. Once it comes up on the boat, we have equipment that will sweep the mussels off the line. We have machines that will separate and debeard and get them pretty cleaned up. The stuff we're harvesting today is going to be on someone's lunch plate tomorrow in Seattle and be on someone's dinner plate in New York City.
So shellfish generally are considered like an extremely sustainable and green choice, even though they're farmed. I think there's a lot of misinterpretation when someone hears that it's a farmed product. So how is this different?
Well, it's a little bit different, as you know, we have only so many rafts here, and we have a cap on those rafts. But really, if we take all these rafts and push them together, it only take about 1% of Penn Cove. And to get 2 million pounds out of 1% of this big bay is pretty good. We really depend on the natural set we get along the beaches here, so it's important that we keep our water really clean, because that gives us our crop every year. This is a renewable resource we're gonna have year after year after year. And it's a great food source. It's a very healthy food choice, and it's sustainable.
We are about to head out and see how the clams and oysters are raised and also how they're harvested with Ian. Now, what's interesting, the oysters, they're raised in a number of different ways, and depending on how they're farmed, the shape of their shells can actually change. So we're standing in the middle of Samish Bay. Canada is right over there. And you said this is 18 acres of oysters?
This parcel is 18 acres. Behind us, we have 40 acres of clams, and we have another 43 acres of oyster bed over this way. There's hundreds of acres of oysters and clams under cultivation out here in Samish Bay. They've been farming oysters out here for over 80 years, probably close to 90 years. So the history here is a really great shellfish. These oysters are just over a year old. We'll be harvesting these within another 6 to 8 months. SEPA baskets and other tumble baskets, what that allows us to do is take an oyster that would grow flat on the beach, and it grows it in a more of a round shape because it's in the basket. The basket's tumbling the oysters against themselves, and it breaks the edges off, and that creates a nice deep cup. If you've been to an oyster bar and you shuck the oyster and the top breaks in half or the bottom cracks in half, That's because they haven't been conditioned that long out of the water. These are conditioned every day that they're grown by this tumbling action, and it provides a nice deep cover.
Our next stop is here at the Oystercatcher, where Chef Tyler is going to show me how to make an incredibly unique dish using mussels and clams, and he's also going to show me how to shuck oysters. So Tyler has pan-fried these gorgeous clams, and we have the lightly pickled mussels. And tell me how you treated this.
So it's called an escabeche, just a really simple pickle of olive oil, champagne, and sherry vinegars, and then aromatic vegetables, Thai chilies that we have fermented.
And this is bread that you baked downstairs, where you have a bakery using local wheat.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. Got some beautiful sunflower shoots. Pink beauty radishes. A little bit more of those Thai chilies, just for a little kick.
Gorgeous. Wow, that's beautiful.
Nice piece of crusty bread. This is our sprouted wheat berries. A nice cracked pepper aioli. Lots of fresh herbs in there.
Wow,
Kind
look
of
at
a
that.
traditional Spanish dish turned Northwest.
Gorgeous. So this particular variety of oyster.
So we actually have 4 varieties here.
Oh, fantastic.
So these are Humboldt Golds. They're actually from Humboldt, California. And then we have a Penn Cove Select. These are called Sandwich Pearls. And then finally we have a Willapa Bay.
So tell me about the flavors.
So brine and sweet are the flavor components of that. So brine is going to obviously be, real salty, and then sweet is going to be milder, nice finish to it.
Nice. And you're serving it with a mignonette, which is my favorite thing to eat oysters with. So tell us about the mignonette sauce.
So very simple sauce, sugar, red wine vinegar, shallots, pepper.
Yeah, it's delicious.
yeah.
Because it doesn't overwhelm the flavor of the oyster.
Yep.
All right, I'm ready to learn.
Great. So we're actually going to do these Penn Cove Selects because they're going to be the easiest ones to open. I've got the towel folded here, just so that one side is elevated.
Okay.
And that's going to hold the oyster in place. So you want to stick the knife right in that hinge there, kind of hold the oyster in place.
Yeah.
And then just gentle pressure. You don't need to
This
really
is
force
how
it in
people
there.
stab themselves.
It is. But if you look at it, if the knife is going to go anywhere, it's going to go straight down into the towel.
Yeah.
So just gentle pressure down, and then you're going to get it to where it's kind of stuck in there. You don't need to push anymore. This is just a simple twisting motion at this point. So now you've got it popped open, and we just need to separate that mussel right on top there.
Beautiful.
Just like that. Little shell fragments out of there. And then we just want to separate that mussel on the bottom side as well, so they slide out easily.
Perfect. That's a beautiful oyster.
Yeah, they're really nice.
Okay, I'm gonna try. There we go.
There you go.
I'm in there.
Yeah, and
Okay.
you twist, perfect.
Yep. Got it. So now I run my knife which way?
Just along the top, exactly, just that way.
Got it.
And that muscle's gonna be right there.
Okay.
Yep, just like that.
That was fun. It's kind of addictive. Like, once you figure it out, I'm like, wait, I want to try that again.
There's some days where I wish I could just go, New Orleans and shuck oysters for 12 hours a day.
I bet somebody would let you do that.
I'm sure they would.
Best part of the job, right? All right.
Cheers.
Cheers. It's delicious. It tastes like meaty ocean.
Absolutely.
We are here at Taylor Shellfish Farms, which actually opened up in 1890, to meet up with Bill Dewey, and he's going to chat with me about water quality issues and ocean acidification.
Taylor's, they farm now for 5 generations, and They want to farm for many more generations, and we need clean water to grow shellfish. They're filter feeders. So I work with our state legislature, I work with our county government here in all the different counties we farm in, and work back in Congress to try to make sure we have appropriate laws in place and that those laws are being enforced.
I've known Bill for a long time, and he's just a great advocate for the industry. He does his homework like nobody I know, and he has gone beyond just representing Taylor shellfish. He represents the entire Pacific Coast shellfish industry very well when it comes to dealing with policy matters back in D.C. or on the world stage.
People like to live on the shoreline for obvious reasons. You can see today, you know, it's a great place to be.
It's gorgeous.
It draws people to want to live there, and that urbanization of the shoreline brings with it pollutants and so challenges, whether it's stormwater runoff from our roads or pet waste from the lawns or pesticides or fertilizers they're putting on their lawns, et cetera. So that's what we call non-point pollution sources are a challenge for us. Then there's a bigger one that's come to light in more recent years. It's called ocean acidification. So as we burn fossil fuels and emit CO2 from those fossil fuels, most of it's absorbed by the atmosphere, and it's affecting our climate, as a lot of people are aware. But also about 27% of that CO2 is absorbed by the ocean. So what happens when CO2 is absorbed by the ocean, it makes the ocean more acidic. It forms this carbonic acid. But more importantly, part of that chemical reaction is it reduces the availability of carbonate ions, which are what the shellfish we grow build their shells out of.
Oh.
So they're struggling to build their shells. And we didn't understand this. You know, in the first 48 hours, all of our larvae were dead and laying on the bottom of the tank. We'd take them and look at them under our microscope and say, well, yep, they're dead, you know, but that's all we could see.
Yeah.
And then Governor Gregoire got involved, Congress got involved, you know, policymakers reacted because we're such an important employer in the rural areas of the state. You know, there was jobs being affected, food production being affected, and that Blue Ribbon panel helped us understand. The scientists all came together and we started to, you know, get a focus on what was going on and what the response should be. And
so what are some of the recommendations that the panel has come up with?
yeah, we got help from Congress to get some very sophisticated monitoring equipment in our hatcheries so that we could actually see the seawater chemistry and understand what was going on with it. And we learned how to avoid the bad water, and now our understanding's evolved further to where we actually have water treatment systems in the hatchery that are reacting real time to the chemistry monitoring equipment and injecting sodium carbonate into the water, basically boosting up the carbonate ions, the calcium carbonate in the water so our babies can build their shells again.
That doesn't change the...
Doesn't change what's going on out here.
Right.
And fortunately for us right now, it's just these little microscopic babies that are being impacted, at least that we know. As conditions get worse, and they're going to, then it will start to dissolve the animals on our farms as well. And then we can't really do anything about the chemistry here.
Right.
But part of the recommendations from this Blue Ribbon panel is to try to understand, are there natural refuges where it would be good to grow shellfish? And Samish Bay would be one of them because we have a lot of eelgrass out here.
Okay.
And eelgrass is a plant, and as it grows, it sucks up CO2. So it's naturally mitigating the carbonate chemistry in the bay here and making sure there's abundant carbonate ions available for us to grow shellfish here. In the future, that may be one of the few places you can grow.
Check in with Tahoe here at the Pike Place Fish Market. He's been working at this world-famous market for 15 years.
Pike Place Market's been around since 1907. Not only do we deal in seafood, but we have this really fun and kind of creative way of engaging and sort of meeting the people that come to visit our fair city. I find incredibly fascinating about shellfish, they are an indicator of what's happening in the environment that they're growing in that day, or maybe that series of days. So the flavor you get, the texture you get, the sort of the whole sensory experience of eating shellfish is really ephemeral. And that's what you get to experience, is an expression of time that's really small and really unique. Those particular sets of conditions may never occur again, or they might occur a lot, but you really don't know. It's unpredictable. The people at Penn Cove, they love that dynamic quality, and that's what I think is exciting about shellfish. It's a once-in-a-lifetime shot to taste that oyster that day, and you may never get to taste it that way ever again.
I knew I wanted to work on the water, there's no question. Once you work on the water, the salt water gets in your blood and you get tied to it. We have a saying, people will come here and they're either here for at least 7 days or 7 years. Once you're in, you're kind of in. People have asked, how did you get into shellfish? And I'd mentioned that, you know, our family lived in Europe and had lived in Asia and seen what a big deal it is there. And I don't think people really understand the scale of what I'm talking about. The scale is so different in terms of shellfish consumption and seafood consumption in general overseas as compared to the U.S. We import most of the seafood we eat, and yet, as Americans, maybe we ought to be taking advantage of this local resource that we have.
We are here in downtown Seattle to cook up some mussels with none other than Tom Douglas, a man who helped define the flavor of Northwest cuisine. How would you identify the flavor of Northwest cuisine?
Northwest cuisine is recognizing the natural abundance in our backyard, and then, in my opinion, and I've learned this more as I've gotten older, get out of the way. You know, let the natural flavors come through.
Well, and this preparation of the mussels, I think, really, you know, speaks to that approach.
This is all the way back to the flavor of that mussel from that water on that raft. So I'm just gonna take a few of these beautiful Penn Cove mussels.
Directly on the hot pan.
Directly on the hot pan. Now, we have shishito peppers from Oyster Farm.
They're gorgeous.
Yeah. So while that's working, I'm gonna put this pan on high. Now this is a more classic French Meunière style, right? It's just a herb lemon butter. And you wanna have plenty of butter because you're gonna wanna dip bread in it and all sorts of things. And it's just gonna be garlic, herbs, white wine, and lemon. So those are almost done. We got a little blister on our peppers. This lemon is gonna finish them off, and then just salt. So you want to cook them about halfway on the skillet, and then we take it up here, and we're just going to let it sit. And that's going to continue, and you can see them continue to pop open.
This is dinner party food. You put a big platter of this in the middle of a table with a bunch of really great bread and some wine, and people will just dive right in.
Absolutely, they love it. Okay, take this off. I'm going to take an overabundance of herbs. And we want a nice kind of a soup plate. So we're just gonna go out there with a little garlic bread, a little fresh mussels, and yum.
It's quick, it's easy, and it's really delicious.
Yeah, and do you smell anything fishy here?
No.
These are fresh mussels, right? And so I would just tell everyone, be picky, buy the best ones. It's your friends, darn it. You wanna treat them right.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Kat.
Thanks so much for joining me in Washington, and I will see you next time.
There's more information on the makers featured in this series, along with recipes and extra videos at wearetastemakers.com.
tasteMAKERS was funded in part by
In the hands of those who take pride in what they do, something unique can be created. Edward Jones is proud to support the craftspeople who define the maker movement.
and by Fleischmann's Yeast and A.B. Mowry.